The United States and its allies imposed more sanctions on Russia in response to its war on Ukraine. The leaders of the group of 7 nations say they would phase out or ban the import of Russian oil in a timely and orderly fashion. The European Union also echoed the call by saying the 27-nation bloc is getting closer to agreeing tough sanctions against Russia that include a ban on oil purchase. However, the bloc faces a challenge to secure oil supplies to landlocked Hungary, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic, which all depend heavily on Russian crude. Meanwhile, the United States said it had imposed sanctions on 27 executives from Russia's gas exporter, Gazprombank, and 3 Russian television networks. Washington also imposed visa restrictions on more than 2,500 members of Russia's military, while sanctioning 8 Russian maritime companies and nearly 70 vessels. Joining us for more on this story is Keaton Mansfield, author and analyst at the Center for Political Innovation from Austin, Texas, and also E. Michael Jones, editor at Culture Wars magazine from South Bend, Indiana. Gentlemen, welcome. Keaton, if I start with you, I mean, more sanctions on Russia. Will these sanctions end the war, or do the sanctions have other purposes?
I don't think they're going to end the war. I mean, we're into our 3rd month, I believe, of the special operation in Ukraine, and it doesn't look like, despite the fact that the U.S. continues to ramp up its sanctions against Russia, it doesn't seem that Russia is going to cave. And so then the question becomes, what's the motive here? I mean, are we trying to collapse our own economy? Just yesterday, I was filling up my car with gas, and you have gas at something like $4.60. That is not that's not sustainable price for Americans. And what's going to actually happen is the Gulf states have already said, we don't have any more oil to give the United States. And if we're sanctioning Gazprom, the U.S. is going to collapse its own petrol industry, and Europe is already, especially Germany, has already seen that it can't shut off Russia and do whatever the U.S. and NATO wants without destroying its own country.
Okay, let's get Mr. E. Michael Jones's perspective. Mr. Jones, those who are imposing sanctions, why are they not backing the peace process?
Well, the United States is engaged now in a proxy war with Russia that they conceive of as the second Afghanistan. So this is a war where they think that Russia is going to expend all of its military and financial capital in a pointless battle, which they will lose after long haul, and that will lead to the collapse of Russia in the same way that the Afghanistan war led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. I think that's the American goal in here. That's why they're not negotiating. This thing could have been ended with negotiation before it started, but this is the long-term goal. Now, in order to do that, they planned sanctions. The sanctions were supposed to crash the Russian economy. That hasn't happened. And now they're going to sanction energy, and the main victim of this is going to be Europe. Why is Europe going? Because they're members. NATO was basically a control mechanism for Europe, and now these people are stuck in it. Now, from the point of view of the Russians, the fact that they survived this far means that it didn't work, and now the sanctions will strengthen them, because sanctions are tariffs. Over the long haul, this will lead to the domestic production, which is exactly what happened in Iran, where the sanctions led to increased domestic production. That's the long-term analysis, the long-term scenario. In Europe, it's going to lead to the crash of the manufacturing economy of Germany. And so at that point, you're shifting from economic to psychological parameters, because it's not in Germany's interest to go along with NATO and crash their own industrial economy.
Okay, gentlemen, bear with me for a moment while we take a look at some social media reactions to this story. Our first comment is from Pelpois, who says the goal of the dying US empire is to keep Putin involved in a multi-year war, to weaken Russia's military and to use sanctions to destroy their economy until Russian citizens turn against him so they can replace him with a puppet to give US access to their resources. It's not working. Next up is Sagassian, who says, when will the West understand that you will save a lot more Ukrainian lives if you negotiated with Russia? Sending Ukraine weapons will only prolong their suffering. Russia can endure sanctions for years. The incompetence of the West is unreal. Jorgen says Russia defies predictions of collapse. Russian economy has not collapsed under US-led sanctions, defying Western expectations. And then finally, State Ahead says European banks reveal isolation of Russia costing billions in losses. Global watchdog warns sanctions will only make energy crisis worse. Okay, so Keaton, if I get back to you and just reflecting on one of those comments there that says that, I mean, the evidence on the ground is that these unprecedented sanctions are not ending the fighting. So why not try another strategy which does not involve pumping more arms to a war zone?
Well, I think it's twofold. I mean, Victoria Nuland already admitted that they've invested, was it $5 billion into the Ukraine, and they don't want to just let that investment go to waste. So there's that fact. There's also what other option is there? The U.S.'s main tool of soft power is sanctions. And when sanctions fail, that leaves the U.S. in kind of a rather tricky situation, because at that point, the only other option is to put boots on the ground or operate or stage a color revolution or just an out-and-out assassination within Russia and against Vladimir Putin. Now, I certainly hope that the U.S. wouldn't go to this extreme, but in the case of declining empires, sometimes it's like Nero, sitting there and playing his lyre as he's watching Rome burn. Sometimes when you're in the decaying age of what was believed to be the eternal empire, such as the U.S., Pax Americana, that all sensibilities go out the window in the interests of just deranged so-called ideological differences. And I think that, and now certainly Dr. Jones is the expert on the social factor in really any political situation, but as some of these tweets said, it's just going to strengthen Russia. It's just going to make Russia a stronger country, both economically and socially. You have Pornhub and OnlyFans being banned in Russia. I think that's really only a net positive for the Russian people, because it's going to encourage intellectualism, not sitting at home and absorbing all these very decadent and very Western tools of control and of propaganda.
Right, and then let me just give a final word to Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, I mean, first, how will the war in Ukraine end, in your opinion, militarily, with Russia achieving its goals, or through negotiations?
No, I think unfortunately we have a certain segment of the leadership of this country, a large segment, that is gripped by a moral panic. You have no idea of what it's like over here now that the Supreme Court has announced it's going to overturn Roe versus Wade, which is the Supreme Court decision allowing abortion. These people are going crazy now. It's like the end of the world for these people. And it's like Masada. It's like the Samson option. They're willing to destroy the entire country if they can't do what they want with their depraved sexual lives. And the foreign policy is a manifestation of the same type of craziness. So we've got a group of people with their hands gripping the steering wheel, ready to drive this car over the cliff. It doesn't look good. I don't see negotiations being part of this plan.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time and your thoughts. Let me thank our guests. Keaton Mansfield is an author and analyst with the Center for Political Innovation, joining us from Austin, Texas, and E. Michael Jones, the editor at Culture Wars magazine that is from South Bend, Indiana. That brings an end to another edition of the News Review.